What is up, everyone? Brandon Ferst, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome into another edition of the NFL Weekly. It's the seventh edition of this season, week 7 to be exact. It's been a crazy start to things, but with me, as always, to help break it all down is my friend and co-host, Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. We have a slight reprieve from the fall weather in San Diego, looking at 90 degrees tomorrow, and I'm just jumping up and down about it, which there's people in the household that think I'm absolutely nuts. But if I don't have to put on slippers and socks and hoodies, I'm real happy.
There you go. Yeah, it's probably I've always thought, October, at least in San Diego, is always been kind of the hottest month.
Yep.
Thank goodness, and I am knocking on wood as I say this right now, but seem to have looks like we're going to be getting through a fire season relatively unscathed, at least down here in Southern California. Obviously, other places not so much, unfortunately. But yeah, it's that time of year. You're starting to see the Halloween decorations have probably been up since 4th of July, but I'm starting to acknowledge them and seeing them. But pretty soon we will, of course, be seeing the little ones running around as Spider-Mans and Barbies and Kens and all that on that Halloween day. But for our time now, we are going to be focusing on week 7 of the NFL and really the NFL as a whole. Going to look back at, it's the first 5 weeks were pretty wild. And it seemed like the NFL, they looked and they said, okay, every single team has kind of been up and down. And someone went, well, not these teams. And the NFL went, oh, okay, we'll take care of that in week 6. Because obviously we have no more unbeaten teams. And I think both conferences are as wide open as they've been in quite some time. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on week 6 and really the first third of the season as a whole?
Yeah, here we are down to no undefeated teams, and that's kind of surprising. I think for both of us, it's surprising. Again, as I sent you a text on Sunday night because I had been kind of occupied, and I was like, "Is this a mistake? Did the Jets really beat the Eagles?" I mean, that was a shocker to see San Francisco go down to Cleveland. Maybe not as much of a shock, still a surprise though. But I'll tell you what, one of the things on my notes says watch that Cleveland defense. They are playing some pretty decent football. They're going to keep Cleveland in a lot of games. If they can keep getting better week in and week out, they're going to have an okay season, and it's going to make them look real good going into the 2024 season. Washington came back, got a victory on the road at Atlanta, which was a nice thing to see. Arizona just, they're just a little too inconsistent for me. Every now and then, I think that they're going to come around and really have an explosive game. And then what do? They score 9 points against the Rams. Detroit, Tampa Bay turned out a little better for Detroit than I thought it would, but still a close game kept Detroit to 20 points, which kind of surprising this year because they've been putting some points on the board. And then, of course, we have the Raiders and New England, which was just, you talk about a blah game when it came right down to it. And Belichick is in a world of hurt right now. I don't know how much longer they're going to. He's Belichick. So as I start to say, how much longer is the organization going to put up with it? I think they're going to put up with it for quite a while. I don't know if they would ever just remove Belichick or just ask it. Maybe it's time for you to reconsider. But we'll see what happens with the rest of the New England season. They don't have it any easier this week as they will be taking on the Buffalo Bills, who have been kind of flat, I think, between the last couple of weeks. Give them travel when they went to over across the pond the week before, but even this past week, they were not gangbusters against the New York Giants, who, by gosh, 3 games. It's been 3 total games. If the New York Giants could have scored 1 touchdown, they'd have beat the Buffalo Bills. I mean, it's just a wild season still.
Yeah, and for me, I think one of the more I texted you about it, one of the oddest of the results might have been that the Cowboys and Chargers stayed under. I know the Cowboys have a good defense, but I thought we were going to see a bit of a shootout there. it was halfway through the third quarter, and I think we were looking at 17 total points. I think it was 10-7 at one point when I texted you. But on the Belichick side of things, it's going to be a very, now, if you're on the outside and you're not Robert Kraft, it's going to be very interesting. I think inside that building, it is a very awkward situation because he has brought so much success. He's going to go down as one of the greatest coaches ever. Really kind of, I mean, unless it really gets bad late. But I don't know if Robert Kraft is going to let Belichick just kind of ride off into the sunset and pull the Patriots down with him. Because the one thing, I think the only maybe reprieve for Belichick would Robert Kraft come to him and said, look, I need to bring someone in that can, I don't want to say be over your head, but someone's going to focus on player personnel, because Belichick is carte blanche. Every single bit of that team, Belichick built, which prior to about 2 years ago was a positive. Now I think we're seeing it in the opposite direction. I think it's more than just Tom Brady as well. I don't think it was that simple that, once Tom Brady left, Belichick just forgot how to coach. There were a lot of really good players and a lot of players that Belichick found late in drafts or off the scrap heap, if you will. I mean, Wes Welker, he found him after being tossed around a few times. Countless other players like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how things go in New England because I don't see it changing anytime soon. And it could get to a point now where maybe you become one of the 5 or 6 teams that just go all in on choking for Caleb this offseason, despite maybe what we saw this past weekend with my Trojans. Congrats there to you, Raider Jim. One of the only times that we'll be on the opposite side of things. But
yes, sir. Yep.
But no, it's and then the 72 Dolphins. This might be the earliest they've cracked out the champagne in quite some time. I think they normally get to wait till at least the holiday season to break the champagne out, but they will keep their record as the only undefeated team. But it's just been a wild season, and I just wonder if either this kind of levels out and we do finally kind of start to see the cream rise to the top and teams get a lot more consistent, because that's been the biggest thing for me. I've seen Buffalo play like they could be champions, and then I've seen them play like they look like they have regressed back to the pre-Josh Allen. And you could say that essentially about now every team. And I think that is the hardest part of handicapping on the spread side, and even just trying to get a handle, if you're doing the, pick'ems or this or that, just straight up, it's hard enough. PJ Walker and Zach Wilson took down the 2 best teams in the NFL last week. That doesn't seem real. Maybe if you would have given me one. Now, I will say on Cleveland's side of things, there's one person who should be a little worried. I think it's Deshaun Watson, because I'm not sitting here saying PJ Walker is going to take his job, but that offense didn't look that much different with PJ Walker rather than Deshaun Watson. And you alluded to it, a historic defense that we're looking at right now. I think I saw a stat. It was maybe just a tick over 1,000 yards allowed in the first 5 games. It's either number 2 ever or an NFL record. I don't quite remember where they stood up, but this defense is fantastic. But the offense without Nick Chubb, not doing them any favors. But we shall see as we do our best to break down. Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing. I had it in my notes. I didn't watch the London game. Look, I wake up 5:30 Monday through Friday, so you really got to get me to wake up 6:30 here on the West Coast to watch Tennessee Baltimore. But one thing I did see in that game, there was a muffed punt, and the returner went to sit on the bench. Coincidentally sat next to DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins looked at him, rolled his eyes, and got up and walked away from him. I'm going to say this right now. That tells me everything I need to know about DeAndre Hopkins. You can take all your stats, you can take all that stuff, you can throw it out the window. The only thing that matters to me is DeAndre Hopkins, at least in that moment, is a bad teammate, period.
Correct.
Now, you want to be frustrated with someone, this or that, I understand. But at that point, your teammate needs you to be there to pick him up. No one feels worse in that situation than that individual. I promise you that. Trust me, I don't know the guy's name. That means he's probably making league minimum. DeAndre Hopkins probably makes more than he does in 2 games. I just would like to see a little more class out of DeAndre Hopkins. But yeah, that
That's
was one thing
leadership,
that did jump out. Yeah,
locker room
I mean,
leadership.
yeah, and I'm not even talking about picking him up and putting your arm around him, but you don't need to make a spectacle out of it. The cameras are going to be near him or on him. It was a really bad look from a veteran who's getting paid a lot of, well, I don't know if he's getting paid NFL wise a lot of money, but it just wasn't a very good look in my mind from DeAndre Hopkins, frustration and all. But moving into week 7, we are going to start as always with Thursday night football. Nod to our comrade Coach Brandon Lupien. We have the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're heading to New Orleans to face the Saints. The Saints are 1-point favorites, so essentially a pick'em game. The over/under sits at 39.5. Raider Jim, I'll give you the honors to get us started. Thursday night football, Jaguars at Saints.
Going to be an interesting game, and part of that is I think it's still unknown if Trevor Lawrence is going to be able to play. He kind of tweaked his knee, which it's not a surgery knee. There's nothing going on like that, but I think he sprained it pretty good. He was still questionable as of yesterday. If he does suit up and he does play, that's going to be, of course, to the benefit of Jacksonville. Either way, I think this is going to be a pretty close game. Right now, I see that you have down New Orleans as the -1 at home. And boy, I never like that when you see the home team not getting the courtesy 3 points. So New Orleans -1. I'm going to take Jacksonville in the money line on this one. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of points. That's just not what either of these teams has done. I will pick up a point on that, though, and give me 40.5 and take under Jacksonville money line. And Derek Carr, he's having an okay time, but it's minimal. That's a stretch to even say okay. He's not lighting it on fire in New Orleans, and it's, as I said early on, it's not going to be the Drew Brees effect.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate for the Saints because that division is right there in front of them. I mean, nobody in that division seems to kind of want to take control. And obviously the Lawrence situation that would change my pick as well because I'm in agreement with you on both of those. I just think Jacksonville. Look, Calvin Ridley's having a fantastic season. Travis Etienne coming back off of injury as well, a fantastic season. And I think Trevor Lawrence has done enough to get this team in a position to possibly, go after another AFC South title. For New Orleans, I'm just, not only is it odd to see, only a 1-point favorite here in this one as a home, but it's New Orleans too, where you have just by default, you have such a big home field advantage. I know it's not the same kind of crazy atmosphere of the Drew Brees days, but you don't have to have a ton of people there to get that place too loud or at least even fired up. They'll sell the place out, no doubt, but not a whole lot of noise individually needs to be made to be a factor. So I just like Jacksonville in the money line here. Of course, if Trevor Lawrence does start, and then I do like the under a lot. I think we have two teams that rely on their defenses. And at the end of the day, I think Jacksonville has a better offense. So that's why I'm giving Jacksonville kind of the edge overall. But I do think we are going to see these teams struggle for points. So keeping it under there. So moving on, it is the Las Vegas Raiders. They're heading to Soldier Field to face the Chicago Bears, the Justin Fields-less Chicago Bears. Currently, the Raiders are 3-point favorites. The over-under is 37.5. Once again, nobody gets Raider talk started before Raider Jim. What are your thoughts, sir?
Tell you what, it might have been a little bit more questionable to me if Fields wasn't hurt, but he is hurt. It's going to be cloudy back in Chicago. It's not going to be rain. Of course, you'll have the wind like you have to have back there in the Windy City. Vegas is not doing too bad. They're playing sometimes, using, as I often do, the analogy of boxing. Sometimes what you have to do is get those mediocre guys in the ring with you to make you to build your self-confidence and make you remember that, yeah, I do know how to fight. Yeah, I do know how to get in the ring and cut it off and fight defensively, offensively if I have to. That's kind of what the Raiders schedule has done for them. last week and again this week. Do the Raiders cover the 3 points? I very much believe they do. I may change that at the last minute and go 2.5, but I think without Fields, they should do okay. Defense did not do too bad against the New England Patriots, but I still see a little loose coverage on the secondary at times. Not real bad. They're doing better. They're making the tackles, which is nicer. They're getting to the ball a lot faster. Max Crosby's Max Crosby. Divine Abloh is really having a nice season coming around. So let's hope that they can do it again. But I will tell you, the Raiders still, they've only, I believe, put on 100 points on the board. That's not going to get you very far. It may get you far in the AFC West, which is turning into the division of mediocrity, with the exception of the Chiefs. And even that, I'm going to get to them in a couple spots here. But the Raiders will cover the 3 on the over-under. Give me a point. I'll take 38.5 and under on this one.
Yeah, this obviously I think the big one is Justin Fields not being in. And I mean the Bears, look, I don't know Tyson Bagent. I think he went to, I think they said Division II, like Shepherdshire, and set all kinds of records. Good for him. We'll see. Obviously the fact that they haven't even brought anyone in, some veteran, off the street, a Josh Johnson type, if you will.
Go Flacco.
Yeah, thank you. Just some Andy Dalton, or who knows what these guys are doing these days. Although I think the Andy Dalton experiment in Chicago did not go well the first time. But anyways, so I think that's going to be the big difference. You brought up Max Crosby. He is very slowly but surely, for me, turning into one of my favorite players. Obviously, what he can do on the field is fantastic, but his story hits home with me. I have some family with some, addiction issues and things like that. So when you hear his story, it is very inspiring and uplifting, and just to kind of see what he's turned into. And then, it's enough to beat that, but to now go and be, a top 10 defensive player. I think him and that defense, they're the difference in this one. If you know me on a betting side of things, my second favorite line is -3. And the only reason it's my second favorite line is because I can buy a half a point to get it down to my favorite line, -2.5. So give me the Raiders -2.5, cover myself for a late field goal, or something like that, to just, make sure I don't get backdoored. But I'm in agreement. I do like the under here, but look, Jimmy G also not playing, not to say that he would be the difference maker in the over under, but you have 2 backup quarterbacks, kind of 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. I would assume nothing's been announced, as we were talking beforehand, on the Raiders side, but I'm just going to assume that Brian Hoyer is going to get the start. And that's somebody who's kind of been a career backup, definitely not his first rodeo. And then you have Tyson Bagent, who literally this is his first rodeo. So we'll see how that goes going forward in this one. But yeah, I like the Raiders -2.5 and the under 37.5. So keeping it in the West, we are going to be talking about the Green Bay Packers. They're heading to Mile High. They will be 1-point favorites over the Broncos. The over-under is 45. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Packers at the Broncos.
You hit a magic thing in the game before. We're 1/3 of the way through the season now. And I will tell you, 2 weeks ago, I said it was too early to get too concerned. If I'm Denver, if I'm the organization, if I'm the fans, and if I'm the coaching staff, and probably even the players at this point, you just have to sit in that locker room, shrug your shoulders, and go, what next? Why can't we do this? I don't know how the Green Bay Packers are only a 1-point favorite, even though they are going into Mile High City. Packers, I get it. They've only won 2 games, but they're the Packers, and those games have been, they have competed in every game. Green Bay's going to go in. Green Bay's going to have a great game. They're going to be the next ones to beat up on the Denver Broncos. But I'll take money line. I'm not going to do this -1-point thing. But Green Bay, the money line. Denver, I think they're going to continue to struggle. Wilson just is not doing well. And the defense is not doing well. I mean, they put up 9 points. 9 points against the Kansas City team that, quite honestly, and again, that's our next game we're going to talk about. The Chiefs aren't world beaters, but Denver could not really mount any kind of an offensive attack against them. So don't know what they need to do, what Sean Payton has to do to right the wrong. There is more and more talk week in and week out that Payton is not the coach for Russell Wilson. And if you look at him, put him side by side with a Pete Carroll, damn right, they're not the same personality. So I think this isn't having the effect that the organization thought it might. Give me Green Bay the money line and under 46.
Yeah, first and foremost, both of these lines, both of the side of things are a little ridiculous to me. How is a game with Denver at 45 for the over under? I mean, what? What do you expect Jordan Love to do, Vegas? Like, what am I missing? But yeah, so first and foremost, I'm taking the under. Until Denver shows me that they can consistently, I mean, 24-20 gets us under. And if you think Denver is scoring 20 or 24, I have some oceanfront property in Oklahoma to sell you. But with that being said, they'll probably put up 45 the way the season's gone. But with that, in all seriousness, if the Broncos were on a submarine right now, it would be flashing red. It would be the alarm sirens going. People would be running through the cabins, panicking left and right, mainly because the captain has no control. And I think that's what's going on here. Sean Payton, it worked in New Orleans because I think he had Drew Brees fully buy in. And Drew Brees was that talent that said, look, if you get one person to buy in, that one person is going to kind of go to everyone else and go, you know what? I know he was kind of an a-hole to you in practice or this or that, but look, I'm vouching for it. I don't think Russell commands that respect in the Broncos locker room. And B, I don't think Russell's being the one to quote unquote vouch for him, even if he did have that respect. And then to make matters worse, Denver gave up draft picks, a first round pick to get this guy. It's one thing, Chicago, they can go, oh, all right, we're going to throw Tyson Bagent, and they got 2 first round picks. Denver's in that area right now where not only are they not going to have a first round pick, they're probably going to watch New Orleans draft pretty high because of their struggles. And if they get rid of Sean Payton, I mean, that goes down. That's up there with Trey. I think that's even higher than the Trey Lance bust in terms of trade. This would be the worst trade in the history. Because the only time I could remember a coach being traded for draft picks would have been John Gruden. Yes. And that worked out really well for Tampa, like really well. So I like Green Bay money line. I mean, I would take Green Bay probably up to 3 or 4 in this one, and obviously the under. But yeah, Green Bay money line and the under. Very confident here. That makes me scared the way this season's going. But anyways, as I say these things, it's kind of like, have you not learned? But
we've been saying that for 7 weeks.
But at the end of the day, like you have to trust what you've seen. And you know what? If things change week to week, you have to just go, okay, and that's part of gambling. But at least the way I look at it is do the research and try to handicap it as best as possible. This one, I think, is one of the easier ones going forward, which, as I said, does scare me. But next up, it's an all AFC West matchup. It is the Los Angeles Chargers. They're heading to Arrowhead to face the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are 5-point favorites. The over-under is 48. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Chargers heading to Kansas City.
Every now and then these players come along, and it really doesn't matter if they are on the arch enemy of your home, the team you root for. Doesn't matter what jersey they put on throughout their career. Phillip Rivers being one of those guys. He was just too good of a guy, nice of a guy, to not hope he does well as long as he's not playing against your team. This is what's happening with Justin Herbert. I've heard him referred to on a radio show yesterday as Phillip Rivers version 2.0. Good guy, great competitor, can get the job done. Probably not going to get it done in the playoffs. Probably never going to get to a Super Bowl. And there goes the old Charger thing again. Rodney Harrison and Junior Seau got their rings when they went and played for Bill Belichick. Phillip Rivers never did get his ring. Tried it, gave it a shot out there in Indianapolis. Just didn't pull out the way that he would play out the way he was hoping. When did Drew Brees get his ring? When he went to New Orleans. It's just this thing that follows the Charger team, the organization, it seems like, and that goes to the ownership. Everybody has an opinion on the Spanos family. What's going to happen against Kansas City, who's playing very mediocre? They're not lighting up the scoreboard. They're having to fight. Thank goodness they got a defense that can keep them in the games, because, again, it would have only taken 1 touchdown or 2 touchdowns. If Denver could have done it, who knows what would have happened on the other night. Think they could have maybe beat Kansas City, because Kansas City was having trouble executing. But against the Chargers and against this tough loss they just had against the Cowboys, Kansas City's going to cover. I'm going to get a half point on this one. Kansas City covers at -4.5. Under 48.5, though. I'm going to get a half point on that score, because there are supposed to be, or there is a potential for, thunderstorms in Kansas City when this game takes place. So that's going to definitely curtail the passing game a bit. Could. Now, there's one other line that's not listed on your report. Right now, it's 3-1, because it's not a primetime game. 3-1, Taylor Swift will not be in the booth this week.
We truly do cover all the bases here. But yeah, that's now become a bet. Now, as a gambler myself, and obviously I don't think Taylor Swift is checking Bovada daily. But those type of bets right there, woof, like Taylor Swift can make someone a lot of money. And that'd be very interesting when I go back to, I think it was either last year Super Bowl or the year before, where somebody bet would there be a streaker, put money on it. And then he became the streaker. I think they voided that bet. But anyways, back to this one, the on the field stuff. I think your kind of analysis, or whoever that person's led analysis of Herbert was spot on, minus that I don't know if we see that fieriness, at least publicly or outwardly. Who knows what it is behind closed doors, but a lot of people didn't like Phillip Rivers because of his kind of antics on the field. But I think for him and Justin Herbert in particular, he has to win in spite of Brandon Staley. Brandon Staley, I think there would be games I could count on one hand where you watch and you went, he didn't do anything stupid in this game. He's in year 2 or 3, and you could do that on one hand. Every single game there is at one point where he just does something that makes you scratch your head. And this past Monday was no different. It didn't cost them the game or anything. But the Chargers, I think at the end of the day, are going to struggle. They've always struggled in Kansas City. This is a possible get-right game for Kansas City as well. Massive coaching mismatch here. I think the Chargers defense, they can kind of go toe-to-toe. Position for position. Offensively, outside of quarterback, not so much. But in terms of, Andy Reid versus Brandon Staley, leaps and bounds. Andy Reid on his worst day is better than Brandon Staley on his best. So I like Kansas City. 5 is a lot to cover here, but I'm going to buy half a point. Just give me that 4.5 just to feel a little bit better. I do think we do see some points being scored. Hopefully the weather does, stay away. But full disclosure, a reason why I took over here. I kind of like to mix up my over-unders on these, and my first 3 were unders. So I was like, you know what? It's time for me to throw an O down. So I do like some points being scored here, but I like Kansas City to maybe not fully get right, but have a game where it's not, where people are wondering, with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, are they going to give this game up? But we shall see. Speaking of giving games up, but, do you have something?
I was just going to add to the Kansas City game. You made a point, if it wasn't last week, it was the week prior. And I think it's worth repeating again what your comment was. And that is, there is more to Eric Bieniemy not being on that sideline than people would have thought. And I don't think that it is just coincidental that the Chiefs offense isn't firing on all cylinders like it had the last few seasons when he is not there this year. So one thing to keep in mind, and keep in mind too, as we get down a couple of games and talk about those Washington Commanders who, again, it's going to take a bit with Bieniemy there, but they're going to hold their own, I think.
Yeah, and he has a great setup there with Ron Rivera as well. Plenty of confidence in him going forward. But yeah, it's going to be definitely taking some getting used to for Mahomes. we shall see if they get themselves righted this week. Moving on to Sunday night football. This will be my jurisdiction. It is one of the more, I would say, highly anticipated Sunday night football games we've seen. I think the game of the week, but it is the Miami Dolphins. They're heading to Philadelphia to face the Eagles. The Eagles are 2.5-point favorites. The over-under is 51.5. And I'm just going to throw this out there right now. Obviously, this game is in Philadelphia. There is a very good chance that 24 hours before this game, the Philadelphia Phillies will have clinched their ticket. They will have had to sweep Arizona, but as of recording right now, they're already up 2-0, and I am not picking against them. But so I'm just throwing it out there. That crowd could be a little extra rowdy, if you could believe that. It's like the old Spinal Tap. This one goes up to 11. Lincoln Financial might go up to 11 this weekend if they're also celebrating an NLCS championship as well. However, the on-field stuff for the Eagles last week did not go as planned. Obviously, we mentioned Jets get the job done. The hard part for me as well is it was a Jets secondary that was without 3 of their top 4 corners, including Sauce Gardner. So you could kind of look on the outside and be like, oh, well, it's a good defense they got there. I mean, no disrespect to the guys who stepped up. They obviously did what they need to do, but you would expect in a situation where 3 out of your top 4 corners for your opponent are down, you want to win that game. Didn't happen, unfortunately. A very uncharacteristic mistake, I think, late from Jalen Hurts. He took the blame for it. I respect him for it. It's time to move on. It's October. It's a non-conference game. Could be a lot worse. I don't think it changes much for the Eagles. I think they still need to win 13 games. They need to win 1 out of the 2 against Dallas, and they need to beat the Niners. Everything else, if they check those 3 boxes, they'll be the 1 seed, and there will be 3 other teams that beat them. We'll figure that out. But for the Eagles in this game, the hard part is their own secondary issues. It's a mess. The Eagles did go out and they signed Julio Jones, which, all right, I don't fully get that. Quez Watkins has had some pretty tough games of late, but I don't quite know what Julio Jones brings to the table. But we shall see. Hopefully I'm wrong. We really need some defensive secondary help. They brought in Bradley Roby-Coleman a few weeks back. He's going to get worked back into the fold a little bit more, but I'm really worried what the Dolphins are going to do against our secondary. The Eagles have always struggled against speed, and I don't think we're going to see that get away from it here. It's a big test for the Eagles. I'm going to take Miami +3. I'll buy a 0.5 point. Miami money line is not a terrible pick here. If I'm being completely honest, I wouldn't be shocked to see Miami win this game. And look, there are going to be a lot of people, if Miami does win this game, oh, the Eagles are overrated, things like that. Fine, they can talk. Once again, even if the Eagles lose this game, as long as no big injuries happen, I'm good. Like, whatever, it's fine. It's a non-conference game. It's October. I don't want us to be playing our best football right now. I want us to be playing better, but could be a lot worse. So in terms of the over-under, I think we definitely see some points being scored here. I think we see a shootout. Give me the over in this one. That Philadelphia defense, they might be able to keep Mostert under control, but I think Tua is going to throw the ball all over the field. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? The fish head to face the birds.
Here we go, 5-1 versus 5-1. Every now and then a game comes up. It's going to be Thursday night, Sunday night. And at home, I always just say, oh, it's a fun food night, because these are the games where you're going to watch from pregame until postgame. And so that's when I have to have the pizza, the Philly cheesesteaks, the wings or whatever. But that's my let's sit down and really not move, because I want to see the whole thing. Miami, here's where this one's going to be won. How good can the Miami offensive line play? And they've been playing pretty darn good. Tua's been coming out of those games fairly clean. That's going to be key to this one, because as you already alluded to, Philadelphia secondary is questionable. Now, why did they bring in Julio Jones? I guess you do that as a good faith thing to say, see, we care, and so we're going to start making moves before it's too late. I don't know that they really have that much faith and credibility in what's going to happen with that move. But Miami offensive line, if they can keep the defensive line in check, Philadelphia's that is, and the linebackers, watch those edge guys, and Tua keeps clean, going to be bad news because Tyreek Hill has kind of a strain, but Tyreek Hill with a strain means he's going to run 4-4, not 4-3. So he's still going to be out there and still a threat. Watch Miami to put it around the field, just like you said. And Hurts can't make these mistakes. It seems like there's been a couple games this year where it's like, and he always takes responsibility. Very, very good guy that way. Goes into the locker room, hey, this was my fault. I can't do that. I can't do that. But he really can't do it against the Dolphins on Sunday. I look for this one as you do. I'm going to take that half point. I like Miami +3, but I'm going to go under on this one. Give me another half point on the over under. So Miami +3, under 52 on this one, because I think the defenses both ways, I think there's going to be a little more clock management, especially if Philadelphia goes to their run game and relies on it.
And I think that's what the Eagles have to do. They have to turn this into a 5 to 6 possession game, cash in on 4 or 5 of those. The big question as well is the red zone offense. Because the Eagles cannot beat the Dolphins by kicking field goals. The Eagles red zone offense. I don't know if Brian Johnson, I think he spends so much time scripting the first 10 to 15 plays. After that, the only route combinations he runs are either all goes or screens. There is no drags, no curls, anything like that. It's all deep or dunk. I think he's going to have to kind of step up going forward. But yeah, Jalen Hurts, really interesting. This past week was the first time the Eagles had given up any points off of turnovers. This week was the first time. And they had turned the ball over plenty early, so their defense usually was there to pick up the offense. Can't blame them. Didn't happen. But the Eagles defense actually on pace to break their own record for sacks last year. So we'll see, as you kind of alluded to. That was an interesting stat for me. But moving on to the Washington Commanders. They're heading to the Meadowlands. They will face the New York Giants. The Commanders are 2.5-point favorites. The over-under sits at 39.5. I think the best case scenario of what we can expect from the Giants is that kind of plucky, they tried really hard this week. This team is a bit of a mess. Daniel Jones seems like a deer in headlights. I don't know if it's just body language or just the way he looks 24/7, but he looks like a deer in headlights a lot. That's not ideal when you're going up against this defense, because Washington secondary, a little average, but that defensive line, one of the best in the game. Montez Sweat and Chase Young getting after it. I think Washington covers here. I think Ron Rivera outcoaches Brian Dable. I do think we stay under here, 39.5. I see this as a max 20-17, and even then, I think we're on the high end there. That's still only 37. So, give me Washington 2.5, and give me the under. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts?
I have never seen, well, I shouldn't say never, but I saw some of the worst clock management I've ever seen from the New York Giants the other night. Absolutely abominable, some of the stuff I saw by the quarterback, by the coaching staff. I mean, when you're that close to the goal line and you walk away with nothing, that's a very, very poor look. And when it's obvious, and of course you're a human being, so you're going to see you might see the heavy sigh from the coach, but the obvious disgust and talking, lighting up the quarterback on the way off the field and things like that. Giants are just a mess. I'm seeing I would like to see a game against them in Denver at the end of the season, just to see what happens. In this one, I'm with you, Bieniemy. Ron Rivera, the Washington team, takes control of this one. I like Washington minus the 2.5. Again, there's another line. How they aren't a full 3-point favorite boggles my mind. But if that's what the professional prognosticators want to say, I'm going to run with that. I think it's going to be under 40. It's supposed to be cloudy out there in New Jersey, but it's not going to be raining. But still, It's getting cooler. It might be a little more windy than normal on Sunday. Washington's got this one hands down.
Yeah, it's getting kind of ugly out there in Big Blue country. Definitely don't know if we see if everyone survives this season, unfortunately. Moving on to this is an interesting matchup that kind of caught my attention. It is the Detroit Lions. They're heading to Baltimore to face the Ravens. The Ravens are 3-point favorites. The over-under sits at 41 and a half. I'll get this one started. I was really impressed. I've been kind of, I don't want to say discounting what the Lions have done, but a part of me is kind of just waited for the Lions to become the Lions again. And sorry, Lions fans, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. Dan Campbell has these guys ready to go every single week. And Baltimore has been very, very up and down. Once again, very similar to Buffalo. They have weeks where they look like they can beat anybody, and then they have weeks where they don't look like they can beat anybody. So with that being said, I'm just going to go with the more consistent team who is also giving points. Buy me a half a point. Give me plus 3.5. So Detroit plus 3.5. In terms of the over-under here, I do think we see some points being scored. 41.5 here. I don't know. Some of these lines, it's like one of those, like you're looking around like, hold on, does someone know something I don't? But, I know Baltimore's offense hasn't been dominant, but Detroit's offense has been very good. And Lamar Jackson is still on the other side. So I'm going to easily take the over here and give me Detroit plus 3.5. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts?
I'm pretty much right on with you on this one. I think Stafford's going to come in and have a fantastic game against Baltimore. I think they are the more consistent team, the stronger team. Give me Baltimore plus 3.5 on this one. I'll take a half point on that. And on the over-under, I'm going to take another half point down to over 41, but I don't see how they're not going to score points both sides over here. I can easily see this being a 24-21, 27-24, something like that. The weather's going to be fine. There's no rain, there's no wind, there's no nothing. So should be great conditions for a game back there on the East Coast. And I think both teams are just going to be moving the ball. Defenses are going to keep them in it to a point, but not enough to keep 20 points off the board on both sides.
Gotcha. Just cleared up. It was, you had Detroit plus 3.5?
Detroit 3.5. Yes.
Gotcha. Perfect. Yeah. It's going to be interesting. This might be one of those shootouts that is a shootout, but the biggest play of the game is a defensive play. Those are always interesting games to me. I think that might have an opportunity to be this one here. But moving on to Monday Night Football, it is the San Francisco 49ers who are just looking for somebody to punch. They're heading to Minnesota. They will face the Vikings. The Niners are 6.5-point favorites, and the over-under sits at 44. Raider Jim, I'll give you the honors to get us started here. Niners heading to Minnesota.
Bad thing for the Niners. McCaffrey may not play. And, gosh darn. I say this, and I don't mean it in a mean sense. It's just one of those things that you and I, and when Coach was around, we'd all say the same thing. We need to have a betting line on how many games is McCaffrey going to make it before you see him on the injured reserve list. And here we go. He's got an oblique and rib injury. Let me tell you, nothing easy to come back from depending on how bad he's bruised or how twisted he is right now. Sure, he can get out there, get a cortisone shot, try to make some runs at it, but it's going to hurt every time he hits the ground, every time he gets tackled. One of those big lineman hangs on to him and just lets full weight go down on him. It's not going to be a pleasant thing. That's going to impact the offense. Deebo Samuel, also questionable and or may not play. So that takes away two pretty good weapons for the San Francisco offense going into a nice dry climate controlled in Minnesota. And Minnesota, not the most consistent team and kind of been their worst enemy as they shoot themselves in the foot, every 10 plays or so. Still, I like Minnesota plus 7 in this one. And on the over-under, I'm going to buy a point. I think we're going to see a lot of points, but I'll go under 45 on this one. But I think this is going to be, unfortunately for San Francisco, 2 in a row maybe.
Yeah, that's interesting. Obviously, look, Christian McCaffrey going down. You kind of said it. It is kind of, It's not coming from a bad place or anything like that, but I'll tell you what, if there was a betting line on Christian McCaffrey, how many games before he goes on IR, it would have hit the over, because I was kind of surprised that we made it essentially through five and a half
Yes.
games. And once again, that's not coming from a place I can't stand the Cowboys. I don't wish injury on anyone. Hoping Trevon Diggs gets back healthy and gets back on the football field. And Christian McCaffrey is one of my favorite players. He's a fantastic athlete and a great guy from everything you've kind of heard. But it's a big difference. And they definitely had some injury issues. Obviously, Trent Williams went down as well. That might be just as important. Now, Trent Williams did come back. So it looks like he's going to play. Now, the big question, I think, for the Niners, if it does come down to, cortisone shot will get McCaffrey through it, is it worth it? Like, if you want Christian McCaffrey to be playing in January and, February, ideally, you're not shooting him up with the cortisone shot week 7. And if that costs the Niners a loss, you'd rather take a loss in October than have to go into a January game without a run game. So I think if they play it the smart way, and once again, I'm not in the training room. I don't have any inside information, but from everything I've heard, it might be best to just kind of say, you know what, get yourself right, get yourself back to 100% so you can play 4 or 5 games straight. Because I think we would all hate to see on Monday Night Football Christian McCaffrey get 5 carries and then go out back into the blue tent and then not see him for 2 months. So I think for the sake of everyone. Yep.
I was just going to say, on that very line, you and I talked about it on this podcast. I think it's been 3 weeks now, 3 games ago, when Kelsey went down. And then it was questionable, is Kelsey going to be playing the next game? And I think we both agreed, we were in agreement that he probably will. Is it the smartest thing? And what happened this past game? Early in the game, he got tackled or I think maybe his foot slipped, whatever it was, he was limping again. And appreciate these guys that want to get out there for every play, every game, but sometimes you have to err on the smart side. And as you're saying, you're hitting it right on the head. You want to be there to run the anchor leg when your team's really going to need you, or do you want to run that second leg and then pull up lame and not be able to race at all for the rest of the track season?
Yeah, and it's very similar to just the situation of, you just kind of have to get through this to get better and get yourself ready to roll. But in terms of this game, the McCaffrey injury, I think, does affect this game. I'm going to be really interested to see how Brock Purdy plays, because he struggled last week without McCaffrey. There's no doubt about it. Going up against a very, very good defense. So that's the reason I'm kind of interested to see here. I'm going to continue to give San Francisco the benefit of the doubt. I think that was just kind of a situation. They went up against the historic defense. They lost 2 or 3 guys on their offense, and it kind of, maybe shell-shocked them a little bit. And then obviously, look, at the end of the day, it came down to a missed kick. So more than likely, I've always kind of said, unless you're eliminated either from playoff contention or from the playoffs, if you miss a field goal in the last play of the game and that's how you lost the game, you can still feel like, you know what, we kind of won that. Like, we did what we needed to, whatever. The field goal let us down. I know it still goes down as a loss, but I don't think it's time to hit any alarm buttons or anything like that. I think San Francisco does get the job done. 6.5 is a lot. I'm going to buy a 0.5 point. I just don't have a whole lot of faith in Minnesota, especially Minnesota without Justin Jefferson. That defense is just not good. Kevin O'Connell, I don't know if the shine has worn off or what, but it doesn't look good out there in Minnesota. Struggled to beat a bad Bears team last week. So give me San Francisco. Like I said, a team that's just looking for somebody to hit. I think they get the job done. Once again, buy me a 0.5 point. I do think we stay under here. Once again, I'm just trying to figure out their ability not only score points, but score points against this defense. Let's be honest. Right. This is a top 5 defense. Minnesota's not built to do that. But, in Minnesota, that may help a little bit in that atmosphere. But moving on to 2 teams we've referenced a few times in this podcast. It is the Buffalo Bills. They're heading to Foxborough to face the New England Patriots. Now, I would have loved to go back in time 10 years ago and show you this line and how crazy or how much your head would have exploded. But the Buffalo Bills 8.5-point favorites as they head to New England. The over-under is 41.5. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Bills at Pats.
I almost wouldn't touch the spread on this one. I mean, 8.5, that's big, but it's probably manageable against the New England Patriots, who just can't score points. They can't score points against a very, very barely mediocre Raider defense. They're not going to score points against Buffalo. Buffalo's just going to come out there and light it up. So does Buffalo. I'll take a point on it. Give me 7.5. They'll probably win by 10, but still give me 7.5 for Buffalo on this one. I don't see where New England competes on either side of the ball. Either way, there is a possible chance of rain in New England that day at game time. Just possible, nothing definite or confirmed. The over-under on this one is 41.5. That's the real tough bet for me, because Buffalo running up 24 points, no problem. 27 points, no problem. Can New England score 14 points against the Bills? I don't think so. I don't think so. So give me a half a point, keep it under 42, and I think we're good to go.
Definitely. I'm in full agreement as well. If I have to touch the spread, I'll take Buffalo. I've seen more out of them from a positive side than I have from New England. The problem I have with New England is they're one of the few teams that have drastically regressed. The first 2 weeks of the season, when they played the Eagles, they played the Eagles pretty well. Mac Jones looked pretty good. And then week 2, I forget who they played, but it didn't really start to spiral downhill until after they had beaten the Jets. And then I think they've scored 20 points in the last 3 games. And that's after scoring 17 last week. So that, do the math on that one. They had a rough few weeks in between there. I'm with you here. I don't know how New England scores here. I'll stay under that 41.5. I mean, even, I could see maybe New England getting 14 points. But even then, I mean, we're going to have to see if Buffalo can get 27. I don't know. I don't think they need to. And I think that's one of the big things for Buffalo. Does Sean McDermott need to empty the playbook out to beat the Patriots? No. Does he need to cover the spread? Maybe. But once again, as Patrick Mahomes proved a few weeks ago, the athletes just don't care about the spread. And you know what? That's okay. So give me Buffalo. Begrudgingly, once again, give me a 8.5, and then the under 41.5 there. But moving on to the final game we'll be talking about, it is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are heading to LA to face the Rams. The Rams are 3-point favorites in this one. The over-under sits at 44. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Steelers at Rams.
Certainly not an apples to apples comparison, but you've got Denver on the decline. You've got Cincinnati, who's now at 3-3, but still not playing gangbusters, not playing their best ball. You have the New England Patriots, who are just in total disarray and not the Patriots of the past. So goes the remark for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, I get it, they're 3-2 right now, but they are a team looking for an identity. Sometimes it's better lucky than good, and I guess that there's been some good bounces here and there that have gotten them into the 3-win category. But what's going to happen against the Rams in LA? I think LA is going to take control of this one. LA's not playing like gangbusters either, but I think at home against the Pittsburgh team that has definitely shown it's got weak spots in the armor, and I think LA's going to expose those or continue to expose those. I think they're going to give their quarterback some protection. Rams -3, not a problem, but give me a half a point just to keep it honest. Rams -2.5, under 44.5 in this one, because I don't see Pittsburgh lighting it up.
Yeah, no way. Not from what we've seen, at least early on. You ask any Steeler fan about how they feel about Canada, not the country, the offensive coordinator. And you might want to get the small children out of the room, because he is not a happy or a very popular man in the Steel City for good reason. And it doesn't seem like they're going to do anything to change that. Mike Tomlin has already said they're not making a change this season. But I also will say, being 3-2, you can make that call, because at the very least you can go, okay, well, look, at the end of the day, all it comes down to is wins and losses. And look, at the moment they are 3-2. But I do like the Rams here as well. You know me, look, -3, I'm buying a half a point just like you are. Get myself -2.5. Hey, what can I say? I'm nothing if I'm not, original. But in terms of the over-under, I also like the under here. I think you have two teams that overall are going to rely on their defenses to kind of set the tone. Obviously, Aaron Donald played very, very well last week. Kind of I don't want to say a resurgence, because he never really disappears, but it's been a while since we've seen that Aaron Donald. And then what more can you say about TJ Watt? This is a guy who is at the top of his game. I think they get the job done in terms of keeping under 44. But I think at some point for Pittsburgh, it's going to get real frustrating on that defensive side of things when they're out there, competing their tails off and watching their offense put up 14 points every single week. That gets to you guaranteed. But I do like the Rams -2.5, under 44. So that's all we got for you in terms of game picks this week. Raider Jim, your final thoughts.
Well, it is starting to, I believe the ship is starting to right itself just a little bit. We are almost halfway through the season. Hard to believe. In just 2 weeks, we're going to be looking at the start of November. And now you have to really start looking at that second half of the season schedule. Where are the teams posturing? Are the Eagles, are the Chiefs, are the Dolphins still sitting at 5-1, and are they leading the pack? How do the Cowboys respond in that second half of the season? So there's still a lot of good football to be played, and it's going to shape up. It's going to look good by the time December rolls around, and we're getting closer and closer to the finish of the now extended NFL season. I'm looking forward to it.
Amen. And my final thoughts. This is a subject I've kind of left alone. And it's been kind of in the front of my mind, but I wasn't quite sure when the time to kind of appropriately bring it up. This is the time. And no, I'm not talking about who's going to be at this game or this or that. I'm talking about the tush push, or look, the real thing now is, if anybody else does it, it's the tush push. If the Eagles do it, it's the brotherly shove. Show some respect. Thank you. But with that being said, a lot of talk about how it's unfair and it's a terrible rule and it needs to be outlawed and it's a cheat code, blah, blah, blah. Well, I would like everyone to go back and watch the Dallas Cowboys try and run it, and pretty much half of the other teams try and run it. If the Eagles don't run the quote unquote brotherly shove, it's about 50-50 for other teams. For the Eagles, it's at 90. That's not barring a rule change. That doesn't make the NFL go, oh, the Eagles are really good at this, we have to ban the rule. No. Right. If everybody was at 90%, that's when you ban the rule. So please don't be surprised, and don't cry too hard when this offseason, once again, the rules committee goes, you know what? This game was kind of formed on the backs of rugby. Kind of looks like a rugby play. Let's let it happen. So I just want to kind of get everyone ready for that. And to also correct everyone when the correct nomenclature for, push versus brotherly shove. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But with that being said,
on that, you're right. It's common now. It is rugby. That's exactly what I think every time I see it. Yeah. Oh, everybody's playing rugby again. I have no issue with it. And at the same time, I think, were the Bears really that ahead of the game when they used to just bring Refrigerator Perry, put him in the backfield after Walter Payton did 6 carries for 85 yards from goal line to goal line, and then they let Refrigerator Perry take it in from the 1? Mm-hmm. And it's you could do that too, but people don't want to do that. So, but I think about Refrigerator every time I see them do that, where everybody's just in the scrum and pushing the guy 2, 3, 4 yards, whatever it may be. I think, man, just give it to the fridge. Let him just plow through everybody. That was.
I did also watch a little Rugby World Cup. I think it was on either before college football got rolling or before NFL, and it was just randomly on Channel 7. And I was like, oh, watch a little rugby. I don't fully understand it, but it's obviously a very fun and energetic game. But yeah, I think it's great to kind of have a game, a play that kind of pays homage to it. But yeah, it's look, you're just gonna have to live with it. Now there is one caveat if something happens, because the one thing I will say, it is a dangerous play. If you're trying to get rid of head and neck injuries,
Yeah,
it's
good point.
That's a way that it could get taken out, which look, that's well beyond my pay grade. I want to keep everyone safe. So if the science says that that's not safe, then get it out. But that would be my only caveat to it being possibly outlawed. It is I'm just worried about somebody having a neck issue going forward, but knocking on wood that we don't come to that. But with that being said, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the NFL Weekly presented by the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench, but we are first. It's time for y'all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. We'll talk to you very soon. Take care.
Bet smart.